All right, well, let's go ahead and get things started off. First and foremost, thanks everyone for being here. This is the June Active Claremont membership meeting. Tonight we're going to talk about the Larkin Place development, and I want to extend a huge thank you to. We have a multitude of people speaking to us today, which is fun. We have a lot of different people. I want to thank everybody for joining us, especially the Housing Claremont folks and Ron. I know it was a little bit short notice. Originally, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the screen. I'm admitting people into the meeting. Originally, about a month ago, we approached Jamboree hopefully to have a representative of them come on the program so that they could speak directly to us. Unfortunately, they were unable, unwilling, scheduling conflict. I don't know what their thing was, but on Friday they let us know that they were unable to make the meeting. So on relatively short notice, we asked Housing Claremont and Ron to come on, and they were able to oblige. So we really appreciate you guys making yourselves available on short notice to do this. And likewise, Linda, Todd, Mike, thank you very much for joining with us. I'm going to start with just a couple of announcements really quick. For those of you who are not familiar, this is Active Claremont. Active Claremont's a local nonprofit organization that doesn't just deal with local Claremont issues, but we typically focus on a spirit of volunteerism and raising awareness for local legislative issues that again don't just impact Claremont, but our surrounding kind of area, Laverne, San Dimas, Upland, so on and so forth. So Active Claremont's a wonderful organization. We've been around for quite some time, actually since the mid-90s. And one of our staples, if you guys drive on Baseline Road, you'll see that Baseline Road has been adopted by Active Claremont. And speaking of which, this is a perfect time to plug. If anybody feels like picking up some trash and beautifying the city, Saturday morning at 8 a.m., we'll be at St. Luke's Presbyterian Church, and we'll be doing our trash pickup along Baseline Road. And that'll be from about 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock. Here, everybody's welcome to come out and join. You just got to check in with us and sign our little sign-in sheet, and then we'll give you a trash picker and a vest and some trash bags, and we'll go clean up Baseline Road. So if anybody is interested in doing such a thing, you can just meet us there, or if you need more information, you can reach out to anyone on the board, and we'll happily set you up with that information. Another thing that I want to point out to people is we have July 4th coming up. Happy Independence Day. And we get to actually have a July 4th celebration this year. So we're going to have a parade and all the fun stuff. Active Claremont will have a booth at the Independence Day celebration. So we will be there. We'll have candy. We'll have water for people. Come by, say hi. Come learn about Active Claremont, come learn about what we're about, what we do, and if you're interested in joining, we'll be able to take memberships at that time as well. So without any further ado, we can just kind of go ahead and get into tonight's topic. So for those of you who aren't aware, we're going to be talking about Larkin Place tonight, and the 5 people that are going to be speaking to us are all way more qualified to talk about the intricacies than I am. But essentially, Larkin Place is a proposed permanent supportive housing development, 33-unit development that will be going in, and there's a vacant lot close to kind of Harrison and Mountain, that intersection. It's just next to the Larkin Park, which is where it gets its name from. So we're going to start with either Ron or Housing Claremont wants to take it over. If you guys need to share your screen, you're more than welcome to. I have enabled it so that you guys can do such a thing. So if you do have a visual aid or a presentation, you're more than welcome to share it. If you don't have one, that's not a problem either, and you can just talk about what you'd like to talk about. So I will turn it over to Ron or whoever's going to speak first, and you guys can take it away.
Sure. I don't have a problem, Joe, with starting off a little bit.
Great.
There's not a whole lot that I would have to say, but I'm happy to answer questions. But what I will say is that I've had taking the opportunity over the last really month or so to every day to walk by Larkin Park and just to get a handle on who's there, and also walk through the area when El Roble is letting out, and to see how that process is working. And the things that I've seen there kind of match what I've heard about who is occupying the park. There are certainly residents, there are children, there are also the homeless. And I can tell you that from the perspective of Pilgrim Place, and what I know about it is that in 2019, back in February, we were approached by Jamboree Housing Corporation asking if we were willing to sell this vacant lot that we had, which is at 731 Harrison Avenue. And subsequent to that conversation, I personally received a call from Ann Turner of, I think at the time she was Director of Human Services, and as well as Tara Schultz, who was city manager, asking if we would consider this. And so we did. We put together a task force at Pilgrim Place to see whether or not we had objectives for the property use going forward, or whether this was something that we would consider. It took us about 8 months of review before we determined that, well, that the proposed project met and aligned fairly with our desires to address homelessness in the local area, and to specifically address issues of low income housing. And that's how we thought about it. That's how we still think about it, actually. So we made a decision in November of 2019 that we would enter into a contractual relationship with Jamboree. They were one of a couple of resources that the city presented to us, actually, who would be available to develop affordable housing. And that's how we thought about it. So that's how we got involved in this. Our involvement is that we are the owners of the land. Well, it's an escrow at the moment. We are owners of the land, but we don't have, for our purposes, for purposes of Pilgrim Place, we have no governance authority whatsoever. The governance authority and how the project develops, how it's managed, who's managing it, what the structure is, are not something that we can dictate. So we are an interested party. So we're willing to listen to and to give feedback, frankly, to Jamboree on what we think is an appropriate action. But the fact of the matter is that we don't have any control of that. So that's my opening comment.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Really much appreciated. And then we'll turn it over, and I guess either Todd, Linda, Mike, one of you can unmute. And like I said, if you want to share your screen, you can go ahead and do such a thing.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first.
Okay, go ahead, Linda.
I would like to approach this scenario from a planner's perspective. That's my background. I'm an urban planner by trade. I have a bachelor's degree in environmental science, a master's degree in urban planning, and I'm also a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. I've worked in the fields of redevelopment to assist in the development of affordable housing. I've also worked with HUD grants for the provision of affordable housing through home and NSP grants. And I've also helped to meet the needs of the homeless through oversight of the Emergency Solutions Grant. So I'm familiar with how the process works and the types of people that are being helped and the situations that they're facing. But I'd like to back up a little bit and talk about the foundation of urban planning and how it is entirely based on minimizing conflicts between land uses and evaluating the impacts of one land use compared to another. In fact, the first zoning laws began as nuisance laws. These laws recognize that negative consequences can be avoided by evaluating expected outcomes. Of course, the most obvious example would be you would never want to put a residential use next to an industrial use that causes noise and pollution. But there are many other considerations along the same lines when it comes to zoning and land use considerations. Even before zoning laws were enacted, no, excuse me, before zoning laws were enacted, your neighbor could build whatever they wanted to on the property next to you, and you could say nothing about it. And it could have entire lots of impacts to you, and you had to have no recourse. But there's a whole set of laws that help to make land uses compatible. I'd just like to keep that in mind. The same concept of harm shows up in liability laws. When something you do causes harm to your neighbor, you're liable. For example, if you dig a hole in your front yard and you don't cover it and you don't put cones around it to warn people there's a problem, and someone falls in it, you are liable. That's your responsibility. So I'd like to point out that Jamboree is placing a primarily unstable population next to the most vulnerable people in our city, our seniors and our children. I'd like to read to you the definition of chronically homeless, which is the target population that Jamboree has chosen, and along with Pilgrim Place. Chronically homeless individuals refer to those homeless who have been continuously homeless for 1 year or more, or who have experienced at least 4 episodes of homelessness in the last 3 years, where the combined length of time homeless on those occasions is at least 12 months. They also have a diagnosable disability, a serious mental illness, developmental disability, post-traumatic stress disorder, substance use disorder, cognitive impairments resulting from brain injury, or chronic physical illness or disability. Again, not everyone there will have that, but that's the target population that they're looking for. And to assert that there's no difference between permanent supportive housing and standard affordable housing is not genuine. There's a big difference between someone who needs financial assistance and someone who can't manage their lifestyle. Who will be responsible when someone from these units is having a bad day and takes it out on a senior or child? Or when a drug user is careless and leaves fentanyl at the park, which has happened. People have found bags of fentanyl at the park. You know, I like to go back to when our children were young, we always taught them when something went wrong, we would ask them, was that an accident or a predicament? And it got them to think, what could they have done to maybe made wiser choices in what they had chosen to do? Because sometimes accidents do happen and they're completely unforeseeable. But a lot of times, maybe they're predictable because of some behavior that they were doing. So negative outcomes of this project are predictable, and there are risks we don't feel is right, because our vulnerable residents need our protection. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, for your remarks. I do appreciate that. So as the audience can kind of sense, we're kind of going to go back and forth a little bit so we don't have just one person just chatting the whole time. And I forgot to mention, we'll take a little break. We are going to have time for Q&A once we have kind of everybody speak. So you will be able to type into chat, and you will be able to ask a question if you have one. With that being said, Ilsa, if you have something that you'd like to follow up with, you're more than welcome to.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me to represent Housing Claremont.
Sure.
The Housing and Homelessness Collaborative of Claremont is a entirely volunteer nonprofit organization here in Claremont. We were founded about 3 years ago, and our mission—
Can we get a little louder, please?
Oh, apologies. Is this better?
Oh, that is better.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry. I'm not used to my husband's headphones. Like I said, we had a technical meltdown as I was trying to join. So Housing Claremont's mission is to educate, advocate, and connect Claremont with opportunities to promote affordable housing here in Claremont. We are a group of Claremont residents who care a lot about this issue. We have various degrees of expertise. It just so happens that I took on the presidency of the Board of Housing Claremont in January. And it happens that in my professional life, I work for a nonprofit service provider that provides services in permanent supportive housing programs. I'm an administrator. I'm not on the front end service side, but I do work for an organization that does this work. I too am very familiar with the kinds of funding. The organization I work for gets an ESG grant, Linda, which are shelter grants in our case, which of course is very different than permanent supportive housing. So, when the opportunity to try to be an honest broker of good information about Larkin Place came up, Housing Claremont, really felt like it was our duty to get involved, learn everything that we could about the project, bring our individual expertise to the work, and work on educating folks. So what I would hope folks understand about permanent supportive housing is that it is an evidence-based intervention. It is an intervention that is used throughout LA County and throughout the country to solve homelessness. There is a lot of data to support its effectiveness in resolving homelessness. And there is a growing evidence base that shows that it actually contributes to the health and safety of communities. It has a neutral to positive impact on home values. It does not increase crime. In fact, providing housing to folks who were formerly homeless resolve issues of crime because in the vast majority of cases, the types of crimes that folks who are experiencing homelessness may commit are a direct result of their homelessness. And by giving them a safe place to call home, they have the opportunities to address their potential substance use and resolve all the challenges in their lives. So I understand that there is real, deep, and genuine concern about safety when it comes to this development, and I would never discount those fears, because I know that they're real. We live in a really, really scary world, and so hearing folks who are deeply concerned about safety, I just want to say that I hear that and I acknowledge that, and that in my experience, my personal experience and my professional experience working with folks who have a history of homelessness, folks who have become disabled because of their homelessness, folks who are at risk of an early death because they don't have a safe place to call home, they are not a threat to our community. And by giving them a safe place to call home, you are actually improving their lives, of course, but you're improving the safety of the community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ilsa. Appreciate that. Just a quick reminder for everyone, we will get to Q&A. If you could just hold off on your questions for right now. And then once we hear from everyone, I'll let everybody know that it's time for Q&A, and you can submit them into the chat. So next up, looks like we're going to have Todd or Mike. So whoever wants to unmute and go for it.
Hello, my name's Todd Gideon, and I'm a resident of Claremont. I've been living here for about 26 years, and first off, I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank you for the opportunity to have an open and considerate conversation with my Claremont friends and neighbors. This is an important issue, and I think it reaches to us all in different wavelengths. What I would like to talk to you about tonight is the developer and the way this is, well, I'm going to start with the developer and how this came to be and how I got drawn into this. So I'm just going to go ahead and read a quick statement, and hopefully we can continue to talk and listen to one another. I appreciate your time. Take a moment to consider Jamboree's experience and reputation. Proponents of the Larkin Place project have been alluding to it throughout these discussions, but this is not new territory for them. They are an experienced developer with projects throughout the state. So I ask you, why have they done such a poor job on outreach? Instead of public information campaigns and outreach prior to approval in the city council, Jamboree decided to address the public after the fact. If Jamboree is the authority that is asserted, then why have they had so much difficulty in answering basic questions relating to this project? Answers that they should have been able to provide from day one when they met with the public, as this project had already been approved on multiple levels, including planning, architectural, with Pilgrim Place and city council. Why did they only choose to meet with Pilgrim Place and Housing Claremont rather than a broader information campaign? Why did Jamboree and the city council not release facts and information regarding Larkin Place to the broader public to reduce confusion and misinformation rather than leaving Housing Claremont, Pilgrim Place residents, and concerned neighbors to battle it out? We aren't trying to block this project. We have been trying to open a dialogue about this project and influence the selection of the potential population to the least egregious and best fit for this location, considering the project's proximity to vulnerable populations. This is the wrong location for a permanent supportive housing development because of its close proximity to vulnerable populations, including El Roble Intermediate School, Our Lady of the Assumption, Claremont Manor, the nursery school at Claremont Baptist, the Joslin Center, and the youth sports programs at El Larkin Park and at El Roble. We have been advocating for a project that will mesh well with the city of Claremont, one that will have community-driven homeless solutions that speak for all of the city, not just a small percentage. We have been seeking a project that is not only community-oriented, but that is considerate of the character of our city, retains the nature of our village, and is respectful of our neighborhoods. We would like a developer that is willing to engage the people of the city of Claremont before moving forward to plan, design, and fund any project. And we are looking for our mayor and our city council and our city planners to do the same. Community-based solutions, partnering with surrounding communities to make a difference in our area. CHAP has been operating at Pilgrim Place for decades with no protest, concern, or outrage from the surrounding community. This isn't just about our neighborhood, it will affect the larger community in Claremont. The site is 600 feet away from El Roble Intermediate School, less than 50 feet from the ASO Pee Wee soccer fields, and 200 feet from the Little League field at Larkin Park, 200 feet from the nursery school at Claremont Baptist, and about a quarter of a mile from Our Lady of Assumption, less than a half a mile from Foothill Country Day, and less than a mile from Mountain View Elementary School. There are supporters of this project who are willing to make a bad deal for Claremont just to make a deal. They assert that we are spreading misinformation and fear-mongering, when in fact, we have been trying to ask the hard questions about the Larkin Place development that many in the community, including our mayor and our city council, did not or would not ask. I believe it is dangerous to place blind trust in Jamboree Housing as the developer and constructor of Larkin Place. They stand to make a large profit on this development. I see many in the community that are too willing to overlook the way that Jamboree has dealt with the city council and the citizens of Claremont over the past few months. Many who take Jamboree's in-house statistics and anecdotal evidence as gospel. I don't understand all the pushback we are getting by asking the hard questions about this project. We have been playing offense, exploring how and where things might go wrong. It only takes one mishap to leave a big mark on this city. Conversely, Jamboree, the city, and the supporters of this project have to be right, tenant after tenant, for 55 years. The average turnover for tenants stated is approximately 3 years. That's just over 18 turnovers of tenants over the lifetime of this project. At 37 tenants, assuming no increases in capacity, that's roughly 678 tenants from this population at Larkin Place. During that same time span, approximately 73,300 students will attend El Roble Intermediate School and Our Lady of Assumption alone. And that's not counting class size increases over those 5.5 decades. One major incident between any tenant of Larkin Place, their guests or associated visitors, and any of these students, any of the seniors at Joslin Center, Pilgrim Place, Friends of Quakers, Claremont Manor, Mount San Antonio Gardens, etc., could result in a lawsuit totaling millions of dollars that will cost Claremont in emergency services, police, fire, park maintenance, street maintenance, city services, schools, and not to mention reputation. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd, for those remarks. Much appreciated. If Ilsa or Ron have anything that they would like to say, I know that Mike is going to go, and then we'll go to Q&A. If you guys don't have any remarks, that's okay. We can just go to Mike. But if you'd like to respond to anything or have any other things that you'd like to say, you can go ahead and utilize that time.
I'll just very, very briefly, and I know this isn't a debate, so I don't mean to, respond.
No, it's okay. Discussions are great.
Point for point or anything, but I think that we have the day that Housing Claremont coordinated some canvassing of the local neighbors. We knocked on about 220 doors one weekend and asked to talk with folks about Larkin Place and engage in conversation. And I think the first thing I would say about that experience was that we didn't talk to everyone. Of course, we only ended up having about 70 conversations that day, but 2 to 1 folks were in support of Larkin Place as opposed to strongly opposing it. And I know those aren't always the voices that are the loudest, but I think it is important to say that nearby neighbors, and we didn't canvass Pilgrim Place, right? We know how Pilgrim Place by and large feels about Larkin Place. We canvassed the neighborhoods west of El Roble, north of El Roble, and then in the village. So 2 to 1 folks believed in what Larkin Park is seeking to accomplish. And that day that I was in the park helping to kind of coordinate folks and make sure everyone had water and sunscreen and all that kind of stuff, I just had a chance to spend some time with the folks who were living in Larkin Park. There was a gentleman named Tony who, while we were there, he had a pretty severe diabetic episode. He needed help. He asked for help, and a lot of folks ignored him. He appeared to be intoxicated because of the symptoms of his disease. In fact, his blood sugar was so off that he was having trouble standing up and speaking. He came over to our table. We had to call the ambulance to come help him. He was really, really upset about having to go to the hospital because he was so worried about his stuff. Because his stuff might get stolen. That meant that he might lose his government issued ID. He needed his medication. He has a hard time storing his medication. I've come to know Tony pretty well over these last 6 weeks or so. He's been in and out of the emergency room about 4 times because he can't get his diabetes under control. He he's had to have his stuff cleaned up from the park and disposed of a couple times because he wasn't there because he was in the hospital. So those services that we're talking about, the emergency services, the park cleanup, they're already being expended on folks who could be inside. And Tony, he's 38 years old. He said it was okay for me to share his story. I don't think that he's going to live very long in this state. He doesn't have a safe place to store his medication. He can't eat regularly. He cannot get his diabetes under control. His mom lives in a nursing home in Pomona, so he's really, really reluctant to access housing. That means that he can't see his mom regularly. So I just want to put a human face to the folks who are already here in Claremont, and say again, my son goes to El Roble. My older son hangs out at Larkin Park regularly with his 9th grade friends. They've never been approached by anyone seeking to hurt them or offer them substances. That's generally not how middle schoolers and high schoolers get access to drugs. It's not strangers at the park. It's their parents' medicine cabinets. It's their older siblings. It's their friends. Likewise, children who face unimaginable abuse, it comes from people they know, trusted people they know, not strangers in the park. And once folks are housed, they have the opportunity to recover from the trauma of homelessness. So I just urge folks to really challenge the assumptions that I think are at the root of a lot of the opposition, which is that homeless folks are dangerous. If you can really, really investigate that and try to unpack why it is that you think that folks just as a result of circumstances beyond their control are dangerous, I think we can have a different kind of conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Ilsa. And so I think that leaves us with Mike. So if you're ready to rock and roll, you can go ahead and unmute.
All right. I am ready to rock and roll. There's a lot to unpack here. I'd like to share my screen.
You should be able to go ahead and share. If you get some message that says you can't, let me know. Oh, there we go.
Is that shared?
Yep.
Great. Because, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here, and I really do appreciate this discussion with Active Claremont. And I first off, do want to say that, I chose to live in Claremont. I love it. I went through CGU, graduated in 2005, and have been here since 2003. And I know housing Claremont members and Pilgrim Place residents. I know they love Claremont as well. I'm familiar with board members of both. We have mutual friends, and I know these are good people, and I know they have generous spirits and good hearts. I do believe in affordable housing and supporting this vulnerable population. I've demonstrated that. I've been in service clubs since 1991. I've been in behavioral health and drug addiction, also like Ilsa, not in a clinical sense, but for 15 years I've been in behavioral health, seeing this population. I tried to demonstrate this with my wife and children. They've joined me in building homes in Mexico through Corazon several times, and it's really a highlight. And when I first read about this project, I reacted like maybe some of you did. Oh, affordable housing sounds like a good idea. I assumed it was for struggling families and homeless students living in voucher hotels. I've seen, some of these families and bike giveaways, and was always kind of surprised. Oh, wow, you live in this hotel. Or maybe seniors, because this is a senior zone. So when you walk around and say affordable housing for people with diabetes and arthritis, I'm not surprised you get support, because I would support that. But it doesn't take much digging to see that this is a completely different project. Any of these other populations that Jamboree promotes, seniors, families, veterans, would be a better fit for our only junior high school, a preschool, a church, a park, and a senior zone across the street. But Jamboree is only considering this high needs chronically homeless with disabilities such as mental illness and drug addiction, the two disabilities that are closely associated with homelessness. You can see here, UCLA has 78% of homeless in LA have mental illness. The Los Angeles Times did their own little survey and found 51%. 75% have substance abuse issues. And the Los Angeles Times found 46%. And if you read this article that's linked there on Save Claremont or Safe and Transparent Claremont.com, SaveClaremont.org is faster for me to say. You can see that they even get the LA Housing Association to admit that their lower numbers are kind of a compliance with the federal guidelines. You can see from these photos, that we're already kind of dealing with this, and we've been told, oh, this is going to be placed. We know that this is not going to help Claremont's homeless. We are pulling people from 8 different cities like Pomona that have 700 homeless. Our last point of time count, we had 17 homeless. So there's just, a very small chance that Claremont's homeless are going to even be taken care of here. And I just don't understand why, this tent city, or this tent that's going up in Larkin Park, or this mother right here is walking her child to Vista Elementary School, and she has to walk around this sidewalk because this person is just on the sidewalk. This is the population we're talking about. Again, Jamboree has told us that they're not going to consider any other population. And once we commit to this 55-year project, this population will never change. This 4-story, $24 million project, where a 360 square foot apartment is going to cost taxpayers over $700,000. It just doesn't make sense. This is not Courier Place. This is not targeting special needs adults on the spectrum, which I think I've heard lately, or physical diabetes, physical disabilities like diabetes or arthritis or epilepsy, like I've heard thrown around, which 0 studies linked to homelessness, unlike mental illness and drug addiction. The coordinated entry system for LA Homeless Services Authority is very specific, and Linda got into it, that they're looking to place chronically homeless people that have been homeless for at least a year, and we're talking about oftentimes multiple years, and they prioritize disability. They prioritize high use of emergency services, meaning frequent police and fire calls, and early mortality, people that are, at risk of dying. We're not talking about 20 and 30-year-olds or families who are looking for a temporary boost before they go out and get a job and buy a house. This is a mentally ill population who can't find the treatment that they need, and they need the treatment. And these in late stage addiction from fentanyl and meth. I mean, this population deserves real clinical treatment, but this program is not going to offer what they need. Jamboree talks about wraparound services. They cannot by law require or enforce anything. What scares me is that we get Orange County Medi-Cal referrals every day from case managers who are they're overworked with hundreds of cases to clear, and they're just going off a placement list. They're not considering the uniqueness of a program or location. They're often just trying to place difficult cases like schizophrenia, inappropriate at a lower level of care. And what I know of the problems and resignations at the LASHA, I expect the same sort of placement from CES. This screening is not going to take neighbors into account. All the screening is going to be done in the county. Jamboree will not have any input on screening. And then, by the way, we can have visitors up to 3 weeks a year if they were tracking them, which based on our tours, we don't find that the managers have any systematic procedure. Jamboree has not mentioned any process for which visitors are tracked or checked in. The manager just goes and says, oh, I kind of take a look around and see who's there. 24 hours, 24/7 support or supervision. It's an apartment manager. The apartment manager at Buena Esperanza, his career was being an apartment manager, fixing leaking sinks and light bulbs. They give him like a Medi-Cal online PowerPoint for a couple days, and they call that training. This is not what this population needs. You know, addicts do not seek treatment until they hit bottom, and a guaranteed $700,000 studio apartment in Claremont is not a bottom. You know, there's no motivation there. Housing First has no rules. It's all about zero barriers, and whatever you can do as a renter or a homeowner, they have the same rights. And, you know, as for those that have chosen to live in Claremont, that's fine. But guns, dogs, visitors, you know, not being kicked out for drug use in the privacy of your home. You know, I'm against private prisons in the same way, because corporations should not profit from our most vulnerable and apply business metrics to cutting costs to maximize profits on human beings. You know, I believe that this applies to this targeted population at Larkin Place. You know, in the extreme, it's going to be an unsupervised psych ward with people not on meds, not required to take meds, not required to do any drug treatment. And, you know, I have to admit, I'm frustrated that we seem to be the only ones doing any due diligence and then be accused of fear mongering. You know, it's, you know, the police logs, you know, it's like one meth arrest after another, and they are cited, they're given a ticket, and then they don't show up to Pomona court. So, you know, it's not, I mean, these are just facts. You know, the fact was a trans woman was murdered in a Jamboree facility in Milpitas. They had to hire 24/7 security in Milpitas. And even after they hired that security, Hyder Company assumes property management. After that happened, and by the way, they have 44 cameras at Milpitas. They still had 20 calls for assault, stolen vehicle, suspicious circumstances, assault with a knife. You know, I know Pilgrim Place has a 24/7 guard. My house does not have a 24/7 guard. So I feel a little, you know, unsupported in that way. I'm uncomfortable with the mutual board members on Pilgrim Place and Housing Claremont. I don't, you know, I don't like the way Housing Claremont is just using Jamboree's marketing materials as if they're an extension. I don't feel it's proper for those financially benefiting from this project to be the ones defending it under moral duty. I just don't. And, you know, this is an experiment, and I'll wrap it up with this because I know I'm probably going long. But Claremont has 30,000 people and 4 to 6 police officers on the street. Our police budget is $13 million. Look at all of other Jamboree's locations. They're all in industrial sites. They're all on multi-lane boulevards, oftentimes right next to freeways, oftentimes a reconstructed Super 8 motel. Nowhere can you find a high needs population like this in a single little Harrison Avenue that's one of the narrowest streets in Claremont. Anaheim has got, let me see. Oh, I had it there for a second. Maybe it's back on that other thing. The Anaheim's got like what? $150 million police budget. Our budget is $13 million. Irvine's got $96 million. They have 224 police. Milpitas has got 88 police officers and a $38 million police budget. This is an experiment. We've never seen anything like this. And I don't believe that we should be experimented on. I don't like the way Jamboree has thrown Milpitas under the bus. Oh, all this stuff was the visitors. You know, that's not going to make me feel better if something happens to my family that was done by a visitor. I don't want Claremont to be the next Milpitas. We need to investigate and not let a billion-dollar company motivated by expansion and easy tax dollars drive this project into our bedroom community without a realistic look at the unintended consequences. This is a 55-year commitment with no recourse or changing that population. It's a commitment. We're rushing into it, and I want it to work out. I want it to be great. I want Harrison to be preserved, but I can see and I know from this population that it could go very wrong. and, educate yourself. Save Claremont.org. It's worth the read, and getting some more information beyond the Jamboree brochure talking points. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for all your words and sharing your screen and showing us all that stuff. So now at this time, what we're going to do is you can go ahead, and if any members of the audience have questions, you can go ahead and type them into chat. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to read them as they come up. For those of you that have comments, I will read those comments, but we want to try to stick with question and answer. I'll just put this out there. I don't think we're gonna have a problem with this. Please keep questions, comments, and answers respectable and polite. So we can go ahead and get started. I'm gonna give everybody a second to kind of pop some questions in. I know, Linda, you had mentioned you had something that you wanted to say in conjunction with your portion to speak. So you can go ahead and take a minute or two. While that's happening, please go ahead. Anybody who's watching, just pop your message into chat, get it typed in there. I'll read it off, and we can go ahead and have a nice little discussion.
Thank you, Joe. I don't think I need to, there's nothing I need to add. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. And then in that case, we'll start to go to some questions. I see Alexander has a question. We'll get to that. I know that there was a question very, very early on, and then another comment by Bill. So Zoom user 19092 asks, and I'm just gonna read the question. I don't know exactly who it's targeted at. Y'all, we can figure that out together, I suppose. Why are you allowing one of the major funding sources to forbid a resident from being evicted if they're using drugs? This sounds like it might be a question for Ron and Housing Claremont. Whoever asked that, if you need to clarify, go ahead. I don't know if you guys have anything to say to that, but if you had to answer that question, why are you allowing one? Well, let's just say, put it this way: why is the development allowing one of the major funding sources to forbid a resident from being evicted if they're using drugs?
Yes, that is my question. That's my question, and I'm asking Housing Claremont.
Thank you for the clarification. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Sure. So the residents may absolutely be evicted for behaviors that violate their lease. Residents can be evicted for non-payment of rent. They can be evicted for violation of the visitor policy. They can be evicted for drug use that impacts the community. What the Housing First funding says is that residents won't be subjected to random drug tests and searches of their apartments is kind of the difference. Like, am I allowing my kid to use drugs because I'm not testing him regularly, right? I don't know that you can make that leap. But essentially, lease violations are 100% enforceable, and eviction for illegal activities is absolutely
I'm still having a
possible.
hard time hearing you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think it's a misconception that folks can't be evicted for illegal behaviors. Folks have they do have the rights and responsibilities of any renter in California. The fact that they've experienced homelessness doesn't strip them of the rights to be renters with the legal protections that allows, and that includes not having their landlord subject them to random drug tests or room searches.
Excellent. Thank you for providing that answer. I see there's another a comment from Bill Bueller, and I'm just going to go ahead and read the comment. If any of the speakers want to chime in on this, you can, but don't feel compelled. And I pre-read this, and it's a very good suggestion by Bill. How about 12 to 15 two-bedroom apartments available to single mothers and their children? This will provide an excellent environment to young people. Let's help the next generation and provide them with the best education possible with CUSD. I'm going to keep on scrolling. If anybody wants to speak to that, you can go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and fetch another question here. Okay, so Alexandra, would it be possible to get a different developer? And I think that this is kind of a question that could be towards any of the 5 speakers that we had, if anybody has any intelligence or an answer to that. Alexandra asked, would it be possible to get a different developer? Maybe that's a question for Ron, perhaps?
Well, I'll try to respond to that. I can tell you that again, we talked to a couple of developers that were referred by the city in 2019. And we actually signed paperwork to sell the property to Jamboree Housing Services, our corporation, in July of 2021. So I don't know how that would be possible unless there was some action on the part of the city. And so the other thing I would say here is that it's curious to me that we did take a look in as we did a task force to look at what the options would be for this property. We took a look at the city of Claremont's homeless services plan, and it was generated, I think, either in 2018, 2017, and it talks about the plan that the city has. So it's interesting to me, frankly, that this conversation was not had very early on. I actually think, and I've said before, there should have been a lot of conversation about this. Why it did not occur, I don't know. But I think that from Pilgrim Place's perspective, we sold the land with the idea that there would be a development for low-income housing. We passed by, when I pass by there, I tell you, I go by the park every day now, sometimes twice a day. And I don't see the value of walking by the park and seeing unsheltered people, as was indicated in the presentation that was done. They're currently there. And I don't want to walk to town ignoring these folks to buy a $5 latte or a grande iced tea. I think we're better than that as a community. Now, having said that, there are certainly ways I think that we could, a program could be implemented that would target local homelessness. I don't have, and I've never had a problem with that, and what we've conveyed to Jamboree was that was our preference. But what I suppose is that the city of Claremont's homeless services plan maybe is constructed differently.
And there's another question that came up in chat, and I don't know, I think Ron, you might be the best suited to speak to this. In addition to any other developers being considered by Pilgrim Place, were any other developers considered by the city?
That I can't address. I can tell you that the city brought forth a couple of developers. One of them would have required that Pilgrim Place operate the facility, and it was far fewer units. And we didn't. It's not a space that we're in.
Yeah, makes sense. And we have a question from Sue Keith. This is probably geared towards either Ilsa or Ron. What are the lease violations, or what would be considered a lease violation, perhaps?
I think at the last, and please know that I don't speak on behalf of Jamboree, and we have all of Housing Claremont's materials have been developed by Housing Claremont, not by Jamboree. We've asked them to make sure that anything we say is true, but we haven't asked them to create any materials that we've put out. So I believe at the last community meeting, Jamboree agreed to put a sample lease up on their website, so folks could see what a sample lease looks like. I can't speak to specifics. What I know is that examples of lease violations that I understand would include you know, violating the visitor policy, being, persistent noise complaints, being behaviors that would impact the community could all be potential lease violations. But again, I can't speak in front or I can't speak specifically to for Jamboree.
Joey?
Yes, I hear my name. Todd. Yes, go ahead,
Yes,
Todd.
if I may. We asked this question specifically of Jamboree at several of the meetings at Hughes Center, and they gave us a little bit of a runaround answer on it. But basically what they say is the Jamboree works with the property manager in the stages of intervention to try and mediate the behavior before it leads to eviction. The examples given at, or the example given at the meeting on June 8th, 2022, was a tenant that took over a year to evict. And while they weren't specific about what the offensive behavior was, they did say that it took over a year to get them out. So we did pose to them, what are the stages of intervention prior to eviction of tenant? We still don't have a clear answer on this from Jamboree. We also asked them what their clear protocols on how to manage behavior are, and we still don't have an answer from them. It's what's really clear is that LAHSA makes very few barriers to placement, but there's many barriers to eviction.
And just in my experience as a real estate professional, luckily I've never had to evict anyone, or for on behalf of myself or on behalf of a client. Did have a colleague that did have to do an eviction, and it was kind of in this post-COVID world that we live in. And he said, and that was just as standard type, as standard as an eviction gets. And that was an extremely lengthy process with court dates being pushed back and postponed. So I know that process can be quite complicated. We have some more questions.
Would you mind if I
Linda,
add a little bit to that?
please go ahead.
They've also said that they cannot evict anyone to the streets. So there has to be another placement where they can send them. And that was a critical point. And I would also like to address the issue of the drug use and state that part of Housing First says that the use of alcohol or drugs in and of itself without other lease violations is not a reason for eviction. Again, these are low barrier entries that encourage people with drug addiction and mental illness to be placed so that they're no longer on the street. They promote accepting applicants regardless of their sobriety or use of substances, completion of treatment, or participation in services. And they are not able to be rejected for criminal convictions unrelated to tenancy. So these are participation in services or program compliance is not a condition of permanent supportive housing. So just be aware of that as well when you're thinking about the fact that they're very difficult to evict.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you for that. Okay, so we have we have a comment and a couple questions here from Toby. Toby says, I love Claremont. So do I, Toby. I love Claremont. I believe anything that comes to this great city should improve it. How is a 4-story, 33-unit homeless housing project for chronically homeless next to a park and junior high school going to improve the city? Don't the potential risks outweigh the benefits? And this is probably a question slated for Housing Claremont.
I think that the reality is no. The risk that we run in not housing folks who are experiencing homelessness only contributes to more unsheltered homelessness. And all of the concerns that I'm hearing from folks are about unsheltered homelessness. It's about behaviors observed and fears related to folks who don't have a safe place to call home. And so the risk of expecting other communities to take care of the problem and not our own is far greater than providing housing for folks who are unhoused, in my opinion.
Thank you. And if anybody else had anything to say to that, you're more than welcome to.
Joe, I
Yes.
would like to say that I do appreciate what Ron has shared about helping the local homeless and Ilsa as well. And I totally agree. I would love to be able to help our local homeless and have control, local control that's not subjected to housing first requirements that seem so onerous. A smaller project, something that is able to have more control over what takes place, that gives the proprietor more rights than the homeless have, would be helpful. We could help people. We could encourage them more towards rehabilitation, because allowing someone to continue drug use in their homes without any intervention is not helping them. And people have shared that their loved ones have died in these kinds of conditions because they weren't required to give up their drugs. They died of drug overdoses. So that's just something that we would like to say, that yes, another developer and another smaller project with more hands-on opportunities would be welcomed. Thank you.
I'd like to add to that, Joe, if I might.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Go ahead.
so this is going to tie back into something that Ilsa said earlier, and I respectfully want to respond to this because I think it's important. As a resident of Claremont, I've had a roommate in the past that has had a disability. He suffered from scleroderma and rheumatoid arthritis, and had he been homeless for 4 consecutive periods of three months or more on the streets, or over a year, he would definitely qualify for a project such as being proposed at Larkin Place. Currently, he's residing in a similar project in Ontario, although it's not quite the same. It's not permanent supportive housing. It is low income. So I'm familiar with this ground. The other day we met as a group, we met with Mayor Liano at City Hall, and on exiting City Hall, as often happens by the bathrooms near the parking lot there on the south side of City Hall, there were some homeless people, and one of them turned out to be an associate of mine, and I'm not going to drop his name because I have not asked him for permission, but he knows that he knows about this development, and he suffers from alcoholism and depression. He has not been homeless long enough to qualify for this project, and he asked me straight out if he would be qualified for this project, and I said I did not believe that he was going to be qualified, or that they would be able to significantly weight this project to allow for him to be housed in Larkin Place. It broke my heart to say that, but I think that this is one of the misconceptions that keeps getting repeated, that this project is going to cater to the homeless of Claremont, and I don't believe that's the case. Additionally, and respectfully, Ms. Lund, you said that you think that all the fears that are being voiced here are about unhoused population, and I don't think that's exactly what's being said. So I hope that we can get you to listen more carefully to some of the points that are being made. Thank you.
And I see, Mike, you have your hand up, so I'm gonna go ahead and lower your hand, and you can go ahead and.
Yeah, actually, Todd just got it at the end. You know, the Milpitas information is not unhoused. Those are crime stats from Milpitas, around Milpitas, and not just the block, the exact address, 20 phone calls to the exact address of the location. Where we've seen a knife attack, a murder, rape, prostitution. We have call logs of every Jamboree center, and even the family ones have a pretty shocking high rate of domestic abuse. Of course, the managers say those are visitors that are, you know, fighting with girlfriends and stopping by, but we'll get more of that, you know, data up there. We're just a a loose volunteer group. You know, I feel passionate about this, but we're certainly not organized. We're certainly not the PR firm and the resources that Jamboree has to get all this stuff out there. But it's based on the facilities and the crime at and around facilities, the stolen cars at the facilities. It's not, you know, I know I've got pictures, there's pictures of the unhoused in Claremont to kind of demonstrate, but that's not what's worrying me. It's what is going to be brought to 731 Harrison and the park next door.
Thank you, Mike. So oh, go ahead. I saw that hand. I saw your hand squeak up. Go ahead.
I just wanted, I know the Milpitas property has gotten a lot of attention. I know I've heard you speak to it quite a bit. That was a 124 unit hotel conversion that was used for about a year as transitional housing during the pandemic to get folks right off the street and inside. I don't think it's fair to compare a 120 or 148 maybe unit hotel conversion that was used for as a shelter-in-place hotel to what's being proposed at Larkin Place. I think that's unfair.
Yeah, I would respectfully disagree. I think you're talking about putting people because of COVID directly into housing from the street. That's basically what we're doing here. The LA Housing has been empowered to place people into permanent supportive housing as quickly as possible. I've seen their surveys. You know, they'll help them get ID, but they don't have to require anything, don't have to require ID. Everything is, you know, zero barrier. And when they say zero barrier, they mean it. So I don't see it as being that different. And, you know, I don't think that it excuses the lack of management and the oversight and the unpreparedness that Jamboree had to manage that situation. They have zero experience. They're a construction company and they have no business being in the behavioral health field at all. And they've expressed that, I mean, they've made that clear in the meetings when they talk about hiring students and having 1 year experience. It's an insult to the clinical people you work with. It's an insult to the clinical people I work with. And it's damaging to these residents. So, you know.
Thank you, Mike. We're gonna scoot along here. We've got a lot of questions to cover, a lot of ground to cover. Appreciate everybody's remarks so far. This one comes from Ed and Edith. I am very concerned with the lack of ability to control the fact that we are being exposed to a 4-story building in compressed quarters for 30 to 40 persons and their visitors. This seems to be a violation of zoning laws, property density, etc., as dictated by Sacramento, rather than our local laws. Is there any recourse for squeezing a questionable population onto a substandard parcel so close to vulnerable populations? Can we realistically expect anyone from City Council to enter the discussion? It's a very, very, very good question, Ed and Edith. Just any of the speakers can go ahead and take a whack at this one. I think some of these questions here are probably better suited for possibly city officials, which are not with us at the moment for one reason or another. But if anybody has any comments of the speakers that want to say anything to these two questions, we're all ears.
I would just like to add to that comment. I don't remember, it was quite a long question, so I don't remember the whole thing. But the city has said that this property has been zoned for this use for a number of years. And I agree in one respect, that's true. It's been zoned for affordable housing at 30 units per acre for many years. The difference is that this project is not 30 units per acre. It's actually 60 units per acre. They have doubled the size due to a state offered density bonus. And they've gotten 4 density bonuses, the setback distance, the number of units, and I don't remember exactly what the other ones were, but that was not on the books. That was something that staff was able to give to Jamboree at no cost. And the city council and the architectural commission, that discussion did not come up. Also, what did not come up was the offering of the use of the Larkin Park Drive access for the parking lot to be used for the facility. That was just offered to them. It was not done through a public hearing or any other recourse where city officials were involved. It was just offered by staff. And I have a problem with that.
Thank you for that answer, Linda. We have a couple more questions here, and these two are kind of in tandem, and they're both for Ron. They relate to Pilgrim Place. So this is a two-parter, but they both relate to the same thing, Ron. So number one from Martin, who was in charge of the task force? And the part B to that is, why weren't the neighbors of Pilgrim Place included in the task force? So who was in charge of the task force, and why were neighbors not included in the task force?
Well, actually, I was in charge of the task force along with one of the board members for Pilgrim Place. We did have the objective for the task force was to determine whether or not there was an alternate use for it, or whether this particular use or use for low-income housing was an appropriate use for the property. There actually were local people who were on the task force. It was not just us. I'll say, I don't want to attribute everything to it, but I can tell you that in February of 2020 is when the task force had scheduled to have a meeting with St. Andrews and OLA and the Friends Meeting House and some others. And we got co-opted by COVID. And so we just never executed on that part of it for our part. So for that part, we thought that we would have greater input from the community than we actually got.
Joe, may I please?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm just looking at the Jamboree NOFA 27 application. This is a section project description, section C3. And the question on the NOFA is, detail any plans for neighborhood meetings, e.g. small neighborhood home meetings, meetings with specific stakeholder groups, meetings for those within a certain radius of the site, etc. Be sure to address the following points: outreach strategy, e.g. mailers, door-to-door flyers, personal invitations, etc. 2, strategy for support of the project, e.g. meetings with key supporters prior to community meetings, telephone conversations with key individuals, tours of similar facilities already in operation, etc. Or 3, timeline for accomplishing outreach goals. The comment from Jamboree is, as a continued effort of our community outreach, Jamboree will remain engaged with the neighboring Claremont Friends Meeting, Quaker, and the Pilgrim Place congregation to communicate project progress. Both organizations have extensive community outreach networks and have demonstrated strong support of the project. They have served as a terrific conduit to the community at large. I don't know that I feel that that's an accurate statement at this point, in all respect.
Joe, do you mind if I ask, where is that statement?
That's in the Jamboree NOFA, Notice of Finances Funding Available. It's the NOFA 27 application. I think Linda could speak to the date on it. I don't have a date on my copy.
Yes, that was the application that the funding was approved by the city council on January 25th. They were given very little information prior to that meeting. And even if you watch that meeting, you'll see that they had very little information about this project, and they were asked to rush it so that Jamboree could get their application in by February 1st. And this is the application that was rushed and that was submitted to the county for the funding that was just approved this week on Tuesday. And this was the response to them as to what kind of community outreach there was. I don't have that right in front of me, but Todd, there's an earlier part that talks about what outreach they did do. And I believe it was strictly with Pilgrim Place and the Friends Church, and that was all. There was no other outreach that was done, and they felt that was sufficient for a project like this that would affect our entire community.
The other section says that as continued effort of our community outreach, Jamboree will remain engaged with the neighboring Claremont Friends Meeting Quaker and the Pilgrim Place congregation to communicate project. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading the same one over again. Excuse me.
Oh,
I think it was a little earlier, Todd.
Yeah, I know. It says during the entitlements phase, notices were sent to property owners and residents in the vicinity of the project. This included notices to property owners within 300 feet radius from the subject property. In addition, Jamboree has met with the neighboring Pilgrim Place congregations board and community members to review the project.
That was the extent of the outreach.
thank you for clarifying that. Have some more things going on here. Let's see here. So we have the task force question. Excellent. So this is a question from John Scott. I think this is, well, kind of been addressed, but we can speak to this some more. Can the target resident population be modified to accommodate low-income seniors, veterans, unaccompanied female mothers, and local homeless? How did the target population wind up accommodating drug offenders? Just at this point, anybody can chime in that's the speaker. Just go for it.
It doesn't target drug offenders. Substance use disorder is one of the qualifying disabilities for the project. There are many, as Linda read at the beginning, the definition includes any number of disabilities. Substance use is only one of them. And the reason, I guess I can't speak on behalf of Ron, but the largest number of folks experiencing homelessness are single adults. And so that's the population that we need the most housing for, I think, is the short answer about why this target population.
Joe, I have a little bit of information. I did ask that specific question to Jamboree at, I believe it was the last meeting they held. The target populations, according to the county's funds, these are the people who are eligible to be targeted. Homeless people with mental illness, people living with HIV/AIDS, people with intellectual developmental disabilities, transition age youth, homeless households, homeless seniors, chronically homeless, homeless veterans, and survivors of domestic violence or human trafficking. There's only one in that list that Jamboree has claimed to be the target, and that's the chronically homeless. I asked them, would they be able to switch it since it's the same funding source? Can they switch it to one of these other populations? And they said no, that it would not pencil out. So that was a specific question and a specific denial.
And this is part of that magical thinking we need to break through. Let's not pretend that when the police are saying 95% of their homeless that they run into have mental illness and drug addiction, and UCLA study, and there's a ton of studies out there, and the times go from 50% to 75%. These people are homeless in part, a vast majority of them, because of mental illness and drug addiction. And it's not that we're targeting, not that they're being targeted, but this is the population we're going to get just by the nature of the unhoused situation. I don't like it. I want the mental illness to be addressed. They should get clinical care. They should be taken care of. They should be off the streets. But they need a clinical setting, and does a disservice to kind of just house them in an unsupervised way without proper care.
I think permanent supportive housing has. Oh, I'm sorry, Joe.
No, go ahead, please.
There are on-site wraparound services, including clinical services. My experience with how coordinated entry systems work is that folks who are so burdened with either mental health symptoms or drug abuse do not get into programs like Larkin Place, while the system is designed to be low barrier and meant to match people very quickly with housing. The truth is that there is a process that folks have to go through that includes meetings and case conferencing and applications, and that folks who I heard someone say earlier, folks who can't manage their lifestyle, folks who can't manage sort of the behaviors of daily life, or the ability to be safe members of a community, generally fall out of this process. I heard Jamboree say, and this is my own experience in working in programs like this, that the folks who are housed in programs like this are pretty serious about staying housed. And I don't expect to convince folks who believe otherwise. I can only speak to my own experience and what I've seen about who is housed in permanent supportive housing. And I may not have credibility with this group. I have been in the field for 18 years, and that's my experience. I will also say that while it's true that coordinated entry systems are regional and outside of Claremont, there are ways in which the system works where the folks are prioritized to be housed in the places that they're from, that is absolutely part of the process, and that outreach to local communities, even if Jamboree is unable to get kind of the official neighborhood or local preference, that the folks who work in the coordinated entry system do try to make good matches. This again has been my experience. Mike, I think you said you had a different experience where social workers are just trying to clear cases. My experience is that the folks who do the work are really very invested in helping folks find successful places to live.
Thank you. We have another, this one's more of a comment from Hilda. We'll read this and then we'll go on to the next question. The eviction process can take extremely long. Although this can be done, what measures will be in place to assist police with and community with continued safety of the students? So this might be, again, this can be open to all 5 of our speakers. What measures will be in place to assist police and community with continued safety of students?
We asked that question of Jamboree on the first quick Q&A on March 31st, and they said the extent of their protection was to have cameras on site, and that if anything occurred, they could call the property manager or the police.
Thank you for taking that one, Linda. Kristen has a question. Thank you for taking time to observe and notice the students and seniors that pass through the area, as well as the homeless who are there. I too feel for our homeless population and their needs. And I believe as a community, we need to come up with other solutions to help them. This location, however, serves so many children and seniors in much larger numbers. Affordable family and senior housing seems to be the highest and best use in this location. My question is, in the Milpitas information Mike DeWeese provided, issue with sex offenders were noted. Would sex offenders be allowed in this housing? Clearly there are several schools within a block and beyond, and a senior center. So the question is, the meat of the question is, would sex offenders be allowed in this housing? Any takers? No takers?
Yes, I can take
Okay.
that.
It's like someone's got to have an answer.
There's a set of 2 background checks that happen for every resident, and anyone with a sex offense, a violent felony, methamphetamine production, or arson on their criminal record are automatically screened out.
I can't speak exactly to this because I'm still waiting some confirmation, but according to the slide and the information that Jamboree gave at the meeting, I'm going to say 2 meetings ago when we were talking about population, the wording on the slide was registered sex offender, and in a follow-up conversation with Claremont Police Department, it was clarified that there are registered sex offenses that do not require registration. Now, I am not an expert, nor am I a lawyer on this, but it did raise an eyebrow and a question mark, and I've been waiting some clarification on this issue. Also, in researching this, one of the links that Jamboree provided was a link to a HUD, which said that lifetime registrants in the sexual offense registry are prohibited from living in any federally funded building. But this year in California, a lifetime or tier 2 registrant petitioned the Supreme Court in California to live in Section 8 housing in 1, and that is federally funded housing. So if that is indeed the case, that would seem that there is now a precedent that may weaken that argument. But again, I'm waiting clarification on that.
Thank you, Todd.
I just wanted to point out, I'm not a police expert, and I've seen that sex registrant come up a lot in police calls around Jamboree housing, and I think it actually refers possibly to prostitution, not like a sex offense, adult to minor, or something like that would have to be registered. Prostitution happens around these facilities. It's on the police calls. I'm not making it up. It's right there in black and white. But more importantly, yes, we got some screening, possibly based on whatever CES does on their zero barriers, whatever screening they're doing. Visitors are not screened at all. They say 3 weeks a year. Again, no process for follow-up or tracking, no procedure that's ever been mentioned for tracking visitors, but visitors are not screened in any way. So come on down to Claremont. My buddy's got a place, and that's just the reality. It's another alternative that I'd like to propose that cannot be ignored. Visitors are not screened at all, like nobody else is screened when they come to your house.
What I heard Jamboree say in response to that was that in fact, the eviction that came up that took so long was a violation of the visitor policy. That's why the person was being evicted, was because they'd allowed someone to move in with them, and that was a clear violation of their rent. I know this because of my professional life, and Linda, maybe you can speak to this too, that funders, federal funders, state funders have a tremendous amount of oversight and monitoring, and Jamboree will be accountable to their funders that only folks who are eligible to live in their properties are living in their properties. And because and what I've seen is that residents are made very, very aware that they are responsible for the behaviors of their guests, and the behaviors of their guests can impact their ability to would be considered a lease violation. And so that becomes the responsibility of the resident to maintain. And I want to just note that Richard put a link to a sample lease from Jamboree in the chat. I think folks will be really encouraged to read the types of things that qualify as lease violations. They're very specific, and they're exactly what you would expect to see a responsible landlord holding the residents accountable to.
Yeah, I would point out that eviction with that illegal visitor took years. I think they've been working on it for a while. So I'm not talking about people moving in and not leaving. I'm talking about coming in more than 3 weeks a year. And, you know, we sign a lot of stuff. I'm worried about enforcement. I don't believe that the enforcement's going to be there. I hope it is, but I don't see any mechanism for enforcing these lease violations. I think that people have a lot of rights when it comes to their home and being able to do what they want in their home, as we all should be. But it's a kind of an interesting combination between this population and housing rights. But I'll definitely look at the lease agreement.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. We do have a hand raise from Benjamin, so I'm going to go ahead and lower your hand. And Benjamin, if you'd like to type something or say something, you can go right ahead and do so.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. My question's for active Claremont members. I just want to see, as we have been talking quite a bit about Jamboree. I'm curious if an invitation was sent out to Jamboree for this meeting, as I feel like their input might benefit us a lot for these specific questions.
Thanks, Ben. That's a good question. I suppose that I will take the lead on that, or if Alexandra is somewhere in here, if you want to chime in, you're more than welcome to do so, Alexandra. Yes, we did extend an invitation. We too thought that it would be the most appropriate and most beneficial to have a representative or two from Jamboree here. We approached them, and Alexandra, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but we approached them, I think, over a month ago, probably closer to 6 weeks ago. And we asked if they would like to join us, and they said that they didn't have anybody available to speak on our Zoom. They didn't let us know that until Friday, which is why we kind of had to scramble, and which is why I really appreciate Ilsa coming on to speak to this topic, because if she hadn't have volunteered, it would have not been nearly as an engaging conversation as we're able to have. So I hope, Ben, that answers your question. We did extend an invitation to Jamboree, and they declined for whatever reason. We will move on to the next question here. This is from John Scott. Who is to assume the risk when something goes haywire in the vulnerable adjacent community? So I suppose, again, this could be open to all 5 of our speakers and participants. Who is to assume the risk when something goes haywire in the vulnerable adjacent community? Any takers? Don't all jump at once.
I think that if if a crime is committed, then the person who committed the crime is generally responsible for their own actions.
Mhm.
That's what happens when in the world. This is what I would expect to happen.
Let me just I think I kind of get where John is going with this. So and John, if you're in here, correct me if I'm wrong. Please raise your hand or make a chat. He's probably getting at if I would imagine a resident of the development were to do something wrong. So I guess let's look at it in that sense. So who's to assume the risk when something goes wrong, i.e. because of a resident goes haywire, who's going to be responsible for that? Go ahead, Todd. I see you're ready. Do it.
I'm just going to say that I don't think there's a simple answer to this question at this point. I think that the larger answer is that it's going to be the city of Claremont that's going to assume the risk. We're going to have our emergency services respond. At the last meeting, a similar question was posed to George Searcy. I believe he's the COO of Jamboree Housing. And after some contemplative thought, he did stand up and say that to a certain extent that they would assume responsibility in as much as they can be sued. But and then Danielle went on to say that there's a number of legislative bodies and lenders that are involved that would get involved in such a circumstance. But at the end of the day, I don't, and again, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know how that process works. If that exactly means that Jamboree is liable, if they're just not even the property manager, they're essentially the property developer. They don't provide the services, and they don't physically actually own the building and only own a percentage of the building, and they hire a property manager. So I would imagine that, and I could be wrong on this. Boy, I don't say that a whole bunch, but I could be wrong on this. But it could be, you know, they could be in the clear in that respect. They could also be liable. I don't know. That would be a great question for somebody who specializes in this. But I think ultimately it's going to be the city of Claremont that bears the brunt on that.
Mhm. Thanks for that, Todd. Thanks for your response. We have Martin has a question, but it's very short, and I think this is for you, Ron. But Martin said, "Ron, Reverend Gene ? So I'm not exactly sure what that's alluding to, Martin. If you maybe want to clarify a little bit, I don't know exactly, and Ron, do you know?
Well, Jean Coutelier is a resident of Pilgrim Place. If that's the
Let me see. You know what?
question.
Martin had another question, and oh, okay. So, question for Ron: who was in charge of the task force? And then he later chimed in with Reverend Gene ? So maybe he was proposing that as the answer to that question. I don't know.
No, I've already said that I was in charge of the task force.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he might have not caught that part. Well, Martin, if you have another question you need to clarify, just go ahead, type it into chat. And if you have something we missed, let me know. Okay, another question here. Looks like we're starting with some stats in the statement, and then we're going to get to a question. City of Claremont population, according to 2020 census, 37,266. In the 2020 Greater Los Angeles homeless street count, 17 individuals experiencing homelessness were counted in Claremont. Homelessness percentage 0.047%. Seniors 65 and over percentage is 19.3%. Why isn't Larkin Place built for senior citizens since it's located in a senior zone and a senior population town? And we kind of touched on this. I'm going to kind of give a Reader's Digest version. Linda kind of pointed out that other populations could be considered, but for funding reasons, it seemed that this type of population was most suitable for the developer. And please, any one of you, yeah, thank you. It's like, yeah, go ahead.
I would just add that while point in time counts are super valuable ways to collect data on how trends in homelessness may change over time, it's the count of who was homeless in a given community on one single night. And so there's a night in January that the whole nation goes out and counts homeless folks. So while 17 was the number of that point in time count, we actually have administrative data from 2021 from the coordinated entry system that said that there were 80 people who experienced homelessness in Claremont. And who went through the coordinated entry system. So that's not everybody, that's everyone who was assessed through coordinated entry. And I think it's really important for folks to know that 35 of those folks found some permanent housing as a result of coordinated entry, and 100% of those 35 people got housed in other communities outside of Claremont because we don't offer those opportunities here. So we are already asking other communities to take care of our homeless folks. And I think that it's just really important to understand that statistic and why a project, a development like this is important here in Claremont.
Thanks for those remarks.
Can I add something to that?
Please go right ahead.
I agree. You know, it would be great to, again, hire to house our own homeless. In this situation, the area that they're drawing from is all of the San Gabriel Valley. So it's likely, and even Jamboree admits that it's very likely, not likely that anyone from Claremont will be housed, although that there's a small chance. But we will be drawing people from as far away as Pasadena and Montebello. They will come, they will love Claremont, they'll invite their friends to enjoy the park. And I believe that this will bring more people from outside our area than we already have. Again, if we were able to house our homeless, I would be in support of this project. And if it wasn't housing first, which allows the drug use without any responsibility. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your remarks. Okay, moving on. So user MK has some stats for us. Thanks, MK, whoever you may be. Substance use is one of the disabilities, but per SAMHSA.gov, that rolls right off the tongue, a division of HHS, the majority, over 80% have lifelong drug and alcohol addiction. 60% of homeless suffer from lifelong mental health issues. Moving on. Toby, here we go. So Toby has another remark. This meeting is evidence that this issue needed more input from the community and the project was rushed. The city agreed to fund a portion of this project with very little data. I hope members of the city council take note and work to undo this terrible decision. Another message here from Jackie. Jamboree canceled the meeting they were supposed to have tonight in deference to the Claremont High graduation. Why they then couldn't speak here tonight is a mystery to me. It's a mystery to me as well, Jackie. That rounds out our questions. So what we're going to do is, if anybody has any last remarks, questions, comments, please get them in the chat because I'm going to close it in about a minute. During this time, I just want to do a couple reminders. Number one, if anybody feels like picking up trash this Saturday morning, we'll be out on Baseline. We'll be at the church at the corner of Baseline and Indian Hill. So meet us there, 8 a.m. We'll also have a booth at the 4th of July celebration. So please stop by, say hi to our wonderful representatives that will be hosting the booth. Do any of our speakers, I don't have any more questions coming up. Mike DeWeese just put a link to homeless counts in LA County, city by city. You can take a look at that. If any of the speakers have any closing remarks that, we have a Jim came in right at the cutoff. I was about to hit the close button. He got it in. Jim Keith, no one seems to be aware that the Nights Inn Motel in Claremont has been turned into a homeless voucher motel. It houses homeless from a wide range of places. I've been told that there are residents from as far away as Los Angeles and San Bernardino. Thank you for your comment, Jim. John Scott, thank you, Linda, Mike, Todd, Ed, Edith, Toby. So thanks. And I also want to extend a thanks to everyone that participated. We had amazing viewership. This is a fantastic venue for this type of thing. It really blows my mind that this is the first time opposing viewpoints of this project have been brought together in one space. And that, to me personally, seems to be a pretty big letdown on the city's part. I can't believe that our little organization, Active Claremont, was the first one to come up with this. This is crazy. You all are welcome. Thank you. I'd like to extend a thank you also to Alexandra. She was the one that coordinated. And again, a huge thank you to Ron and Ilsa and the rest of our speakers, because you guys really came in at the last moment. And obviously, a one-sided conversation is not as useful as a 2 or 3-sided conversation. So I really appreciate you guys coming in at late notice and preparing and doing all of this. And again, to our membership, thank you very much. We really appreciate you guys tuning in. We had amazing viewership. I knew that this would be a good topic for everybody. I knew that this would be important to all the people that make up Active Claremont and our city. Todd, I see a little hand up there. Go ahead.
Thank you, Joe. I just wanted to take a moment to thank Ms. Lund and Mr. Bolding for joining us tonight. And I know that, there's been some brisk moments in this conversation, but I really appreciate you guys coming to the table and being part of the conversation. It's really the only way to get to the brass tacks in this conversation. And I think that it's a relief to be able to see neighbors and acting as friends and having a discussion about this issue in this community. So thank you.
I'm really glad you brought that up, Todd, because in the crazy world that we live in today, sometimes it's difficult for people to have differing opinions and viewpoints. And I'm so glad that we were able to at least have a wonderful discussion with people that have different opinions, different views, different questions. And I think we all learned a lot, and we're all going to take away something from that. So again, thank you to everyone. I really appreciate you guys joining. This has been one of our longest meetings. Usually they only last like 50 to 60 minutes, and this one's going on 2 hours. So we got great ratings. The network's going to be very pleased with me. As always, if you guys have questions about anything that we've covered, you're more than welcome to reach out to any of the board members. A full copy of this entire meeting will be up on our YouTube. This one is going to take some time to process because it is a really long one, but it will be up on our YouTube. If anybody wants to refer back to it, that link will be there, and it will be there on our YouTube page. Just search Active Claremont YouTube. We'll come right up. Thanks again, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening, and we'll see you all next month for the next program. Have a good one.
Thank you, Joe.